Because the council of the day approved it.
Why? Because it didn't fit within your CRD or whatever it is.
Well, that was before my time, sir. I was not on council at the time of Christmas Hill. And in fact, the RGS had not gone into, started to be developed at the time Christmas Hill went ahead. So there wasn't the regional growth strategy to guide that development. It should have, however, have been taken into account by Saanich Council through its own OCP and through good, smart development and smart planning. Obviously, it didn't happen.
And in fact, my recollection is that Christmas Hill was one of the things that led to the regional growth strategy. No, behind you.
Given the fact we Central Saanich seems to have this rogue council that's going to go list for all anyway, as far as I can see, and they did once go to CRD, and CRD said, no, we can't do that, that's not good. And now they quit asking it, and it seems to be okay. So as long as you don't ask them, the answer is yes, it seems. Is there no way we can get this back to CRD?
It should go back to CRD because, in fact, there will have to be a change in the Central Saanich context statement within their OCP if they're going to move in this direction. So that will have to go back and be endorsed or rejected by all of the municipal signatories to the regional growth strategy. So there is another step in this. But
well,
of course,
they seem to be being able to skirt that issue by using their own...
They won't, in the final analysis, be able to skirt it. They can pass their, through the public hearing, they can pass the changes to their OCP. But in changing their OCP, they're going to be significantly changing their regional context statement as well.
Well, because this is rural. They're calling it rural. So
doesn't matter. They're still they will still be out of whack with what they signed on for through the regional growth strategy. It will have to go back at some point to the regional board in terms of the amendment to their regional context statement.
I just wanted to add something. I know David is. Just quickly, just so you know what your professional staff in Central Saanich have said, that when they raised the whole issue of what the OCP said and the objective of preserving the character of rural lands rather than being considered as a reserve for future residential, commercial, or industrial uses, the density being proposed under the RE5 zoning would create a suburban development. Staff therefore consider that rezoning the hilltop to RE5 would not be consistent with the vision, objectives, and policies toward rural lands found in the OCP.
The challenge in this area is that what is defined as rural, or what is defined as urban, is something that needs servicing. So this development does not have a pipe going out to it. And in the definitions of urban, that is generally what the commitment is, to not putting any further pipes out beyond the urban containment area. So the council, in casting it as rural, or this development be cast as rural, does not necessarily trigger an amendment to the regional context statement and then involve the capital regional district. However, I think there's a very good argument to be made that this in fact is an urban type development, suburban development with community servicing, which one could then characterize as urban, and therefore triggers or should trigger an amendment to the regional context statement and thus the regional growth strategy. But that would need to be challenged. If this carries on, someone will need to challenge the council on that after the fact, if you can't convince them. Well, an individual citizen can, if you're a citizen of an elector in Central Saanich, or a community organization that has a stake in this community.
There are also councillors in Saanich who will challenge it. I know.
Gentleman right there.
We've lost most of our major farms throughout the region, so if this development doesn't happen, what would you propose as the way to save this farm now? How do you propose ensuring that this farm will be around next year and 10 years from now if we don't do this development? Like, you must have some idea of what you would do instead so they're financially viable, this one farm.
Well, David had his hand up here. Maybe you want to take the...
For those of you that don't know me, my name is David Wilson, and I'm the individual that raised some of the challenges around the Local Government Act during the last election because of campaign organizers that either didn't file statements and supported co-development candidates, as well as those candidates and organizers that did file because of inappropriate financial statements because they were either incomplete or totally inaccurate. I've also been involved in identifying some of the claims for and against this development. The development is supposed to have land that is serviced on site, both sewer and water. The proponents and council members have already said that it will not be serviced on
I
site.
thought this was to be answering questions
And
of the panelists, and we're having somebody going on about stuff that has
Just
nothing
let
to do
me,
with this.
I'm getting to your point, sir.
Okay.
So what will happen is that if this land is the sewer and water fails, we will end up paying for the taxes because I don't believe we can hold a developer accountable under law. So the Vantraights have said that if they can't develop this land, what will happen is that they will then subdivide it into 10-acre lots. And they will then be allowed to take their 163 acres and divide it into 16 lots, of 16 properties of 10 acres each, which is 16 houses instead of 57. They could do that and very well sell and then pay off Ian's brother. And that's one option for them. But I also believe that they have also got other options, which may not include them keeping the land. And they have had offers from larger businesses that have said, we would like to buy out your farmland and turn it into agricultural land, i.e. for growing food crops, not flowers. And so...
Excuse me. I'm not going to sit here and listen to this. That is not correct. I have never had anybody that's come in, and if there is, David, please send them over to me. Please stick to the facts. I'm
You don't
here.
stick to the facts.
All right, gentlemen, and I use that term loosely. Now, panelists, none of the panelists wish to answer that question?
Well, I'll answer it as best I can. This issue of two brothers who made a deal should have nothing to do with the situation at hand. I mentioned earlier that the Vantreights owned a large chunk of agricultural land and properties in Gordon Head and Saanich, which has been developed. Just to remind you that agricultural land is taxed at a much lower rate than residential land. So there's windfall profits to be made in converting agricultural land to residential land. That's another thing. It seems to me that if the intention is honorable on the part of the Vantreights and that they are still interested in being farmers, they will find a way to make that work. They may have to change the crops they're growing to meet other needs, but I don't think that should be entering into this debate whatsoever. The issues are land use and preventing urban sprawl and making sure that we preserve legitimate agricultural land for future generations. I mentioned that there is a role for the provincial government. They should be assisting farmers, Vantreights and anyone else, if they're having some financial difficulties, and that was the purpose of the farm assurance program that once was in place. I mentioned that farmers as a whole do not make large profits. They have been subsidizing the rest of us for a long, long time, and it's time that we certainly gave attention to the viability of farmers. But that's no reason to allow this unsuitable development to go ahead. Thank you.
Listen, by the way, those of you at the back, if someone asks a question and you can't hear it, just raise your hand and I'll ask them to speak up.
I've heard a number of things that I'd like some clarity on. Vicky, you mentioned that
A little louder.
Vicky, you mentioned that 5% of the project was dedicated to the park, and I have a handout from the Vantreights that says it's 36, and there's a significant difference between those two numbers. I'm wondering how you've come up with 5% and the Vantreights have come up with 36. And the other matter is that you do not see any benefit in consolidation, and yet we've just heard about 10-acre subdivisions. So it's my assumption that if there is consolidation, then the